So my grandparents and my great aunt and uncle talked Yiddish a lot. My parents grew up. My father didn't learn a lot of Yiddish because my grandmother on his side, his mother, was trying very hard to be American. Um, and because my step grandfather was South African and then had trained in England, had a kind of British South African accent. He had no real connection with the Jewish diaspora, which was quite different in South Africa at that time. So there wasn't very much interest on that side of the family with Yiddish at all. But my mother's side, all the great aunts and uncles would talk, and my great aunt and uncle who lived with my grandparents would talk all the time as we were kids when they didn't want us to understand what was going on. And you'd pick up a word here, facial expressions like when you hear the word meshuggah, you knew what they were talking about. Or when they used the word goy, you knew probably they were talking about one of your friends. And to be fair to them, they were not prejudiced. It was just they had grown up with the culture post World War II at this time, where Jews were very frightened about what could happen again. And even in New York, where there were lots of Jews, it didn't feel safe all the time. And I, as a kid, walking to elementary school, there were times, my best friend lived next door, he was Japanese. Next to him was a Greek kid, and then an Irish Catholic kid, and a black kid, and we would all walk to school together, and depending on who got picked on that day, somebody was either called the N-word, or called kike, or called, spick, or all these horrible terms that we didn't really quite understand as kids, but we knew there was so much hatred about particular people. And, the group of us, we didn't get it. I never understood that. I mean, I knew Larry looked a little different from me being Japanese, but I never understood why would that be an issue. And my parents, of course, never believed in any differentiation between groups. So I grew up with tremendous support for being sort of multiculturally, sophisticated, and never understood how hatred would develop like that. And I would hear in the Japanese family people talking Japanese across generations, and I'd hear in the Greek family people talking Greek from multiple generations. So for me, the Yiddish was the same kind of thing that people from the old country would use their old language to talk. And remember that Yiddish was not the same as Hebrew. It really was more derived, from what I understand, from the German. And it was the language of the diaspora, of people who had been forced out of their homes with pogroms and stuff like that. So unlike the Hebrew that I was learning in school, which nobody spoke, except at temple, Yiddish was really almost like, a language of the masses. It was common parlance. And I remember when I was probably 9 years old, my grandmother said something to my great aunt about my brother or something. And I said, "That's not true." And they looked at me and they said, What? I said, "What you just said is not true." They said, "You understood what we said?" I said, "Well, yeah, because I kind of picked up the meaning. I couldn't speak it, but I could figure out what some of these words were." Or they would say to somebody about a cousin, "He's such a shmoyel," or they'd say so-and-so was, a nudnik. And that once they realized that I was understanding stuff, they looked at each other and said, "I guess this is over. We're not going to be able to get away with this stuff anymore." It's kind of funny, actually.